This video will only cover the upcoming Neo Vision Awaken units, so let's get to it. Ignacio will arrive alongside Mello for whatever reason. He'll gain some Fire Absolute Mirror of Equity attacks, some abilities that will increase your team's fire damage, and the Axe in Peril. Activate his Brave Shift and he'll become a finisher. His own damage isn't too extraordinary though. With the Full Metal Alchemist collaboration, we might see a Neo Vision Awaken Roy Mustang and King Bradley. Roy Mustang gets a Fire Chaos Wave Awaken ability and improvements to his fire finishing capabilities. Activate his true Brave Shift and he becomes an incredibly powerful fire magic finisher. King Bradley already existed in the global version, where he didn't in Japan, and so he received a Neo Vision base unit. It's anyone's guess what he can turn into in Globo. The one we've got is a Lightning Stardust Ray attacker with numerous evasion stacks. Japan removed a lot of his attacks to turn him into a deadly evasion tank, with a fierce Brave Shift capable of fire and Lightning Stardust Ray chains. In April, we'd normally be excited for an Easter event, but the producer has already said that they don't plan to introduce Neo Vision Awakenings for Easter units. Personally, I wouldn't mind if they went and made one anyways, but I guess that's just me. Regardless, the double Neo Vision Final Fantasy XV banner brings a Neo Vision Awakening for Nyx Irania. Nyx becomes a much better breaker with a Fire Bolting Strike ability, though he can't keep his best breaks throughout the battle. He has a cool looking buff that kills him but buffs the rest of your team, and though the buff isn't especially extraordinary, it is on a Neo Vision Awaken unit, and the speed it offers might open up some new tactics. Activate his Brave Shift and he gains Light Stardust Ray and Bolting Strike attacks, alongside a Limit Burst that chains of this group. His damage output is surprisingly impressive, making him a solid unit that can fit onto many teams. Irania gains some Bolting Strike chains and an excellent attack and Limit Burst gauge fill rate buff for her team. Switch forms and she dives into her row as a jump finisher, with a Limit Burst that can support her damage output, though she wants some elemental buffs to further supplement her own damage. On the Nyx Final Fantasy XV banner, everyone's favorite boy band also receives a Neo Vision Awakening. First is Gladiolus, who becomes a better physical tank for stronger attacks. Activate his Brave Shift and he becomes a physical damage dealer with Bolting Strike chains. He takes on a more offensive row, though given his skill set, he's probably best for helping your team break gauges. His Limit Burst can chain with this fun group, and at this point I've given up in finding a common thread. Ignis gets some stronger support abilities, with a decent full stat buff, some nice physical and magical mitigation, a Stardust Ray chain, some defensive options, and a pretty hefty MP recovery. He's already a pretty decent supporter, so the ability to double cast these additions with his previous abilities will certainly push his viability. His Brave Shift enables a bit of elemental support, inflicting strong Fire, Ice, and Lightning Imperils, a cooldown ability that raises your team's damage modifiers for physical attacks, and the extremely low-cost Limit Burst that heals your team, grants a strong stat buff, and raises Fire, Ice, and Lightning elemental damage. Prompto gets Steel, and honestly, I'd normally make a joke about that, but seriously? They legit gave him Steel? He also gets a middling 75% full break and a strong Lightning Imperil on a Bolting Strike ability, which is fairly convenient. His Brave Shift gives him a bigger gun, which kind of sums up his buffs.
For his neutral special, he wields a gun.
He's a stronger attacker with a Stardust Ray chain, the ability to lower the enemy's accuracy, and the capability to serve as a decent finisher. It's a bit boring, but Prompto already had a nice set of useful abilities, and the one thing he desperately lacked was, well, a bigger gun.
He wields a gun.
With the Final Fantasy IX banner, Beatrix gains an ability that removes the cover buff on her, and increases her attack, spirit, and Limit Burst damage. The cover thing looks strange, but that's because her Brave Shift is a magic tank, with a physical Stardust Ray and Bolting Strike attack that deals magic damage which scales off her spirit. She does her job well, thanks to a plethora of supportive magic spells that more or less does their job. She also has a surprisingly sturdy Limit Burst, which grants a whopping 75% general mitigation buff that lasts for 4 whole turns. As an offensive unit, she doesn't gain anything particularly new, but by the time she arrives, they'll probably stealth buff her damage modifiers like they did with Gilgamesh and Warrior of Light Bards. The Season 3 banner has no additional Neo Vision Awakenings, so we'll jump right into Trials of Mana, where Duran and Angela got awakened. As you might be aware, they don't actually exist, so they may just appear as Neo Vision units. Regardless, I'll just talk about them here. Duran was a physical attacker with Oreo Ray and Stardust Ray chains, with 5 different elements available and a blank template if you hated them all. However, despite having a variety of choices, he didn't have the best uptime with elemental imperils. So, to fix this, his Neo Vision Awakening turns him into a physical tank, because obviously that was the clear solution. He takes a turn towards support for no distinguishable reason, and he becomes a physical tank that can chain, at the cost of being a middling tank. So, how does his Brave Shift improve him as a unit? Well, it took these elemental abilities, and now he can retain the elemental attacks. He still lacks an Imperil for whatever reason, but somehow it still ends up working. He has an Absolute Mirror of Equity ability that buffs his Limit Burst, which deals a finishing blow that only gets stronger with each use. Oddly enough, he's incredibly powerful, reaching heights normally limited to actual Neovision units. Angela could use Ice, Earth, and Dark Magic Chaos Wave and Chaos Wave Awaken abilities, and an additional Oreo Ray attack that used all elements, which is a cool idea but flops in actual battle. So, to build upon this, her Neovision Awakening gives her a physical Absolute Mirror of Equity and Boating Strike attack that deals magic damage. Activate her Brave Shift, and she gains, well, first off, a plethora of elemental resistance. She can use a Dark, Earth, or Ice Chaos Wave ability, or better yet, a Water, Earth, Lightning, and Fire Chaos Wave Awaken ability with a powerful associated Impero. As you might be able to tell, the Fire one's by far her strongest. Like the Rain before her, her Limit Burst also has stupendous finishing capabilities, making her a tremendously adaptable unit that can serve as a powerhouse on many teams. The next unit to receive a Neovision Awakening appears alongside Charlotte and Emperor Vlad. It's the unremarkable 4-star unit Zio. How did this happen? Why did this happen? I don't know, but this is remarkably exciting. Just think, who else could possibly receive one? So many fan-favorite units that have been neglected for so long. But back to Zio. Before I get to abilities, there's something that deserves more attention. Super Trustmaster reward! It's a two-handed attack and spirit gun for whatever reason, with a bit of elemental resistance and a small platter of nice bonus effects. His new abilities include a useful fire buff for your team, and a strong fire and ice impero that chains of Boating Strike. He has some interesting passive buffs too, like a normal attack that enables a counter on your team, and a weak but automatic full stat buff. Activate his Brave Shift and he becomes a surprisingly strong supporter, with high fire, ice, and dark elemental resistance buffs, weapons against demons, some specific support abilities, an ice buff to go with the Impero, and a strong single target offensive buff. His Limit Burst has another supportive effect, and though it's not the best thing out there, it has some inspiring potential. Appearing alongside Ibarra for whatever reason is Siegert. He was already a stellar physical tank as a 7-star, so it makes sense that his buffs are relatively tame in comparison. They do turn him into an even better tank, with some support abilities that chain with Stardust Ray and Absolute Mirror of Equity to boot. Activate his Brave Shift to bring back that 4-star. While he does become a better tank against certain enemies and carries some situational yet incredibly useful support buffs, he can't actually keep up the incredible mitigation buffs the entire time. He does have a very interesting ability that imbues Earth onto your enemies, forcing them to deal Earth damage, and raises the rest of your team's Earth resistance to Earth attacks by 100%. This can be very advantageous in certain scenarios, but the entire effect only lasts for one turn, so you have to make it count. Additionally, Siegert himself absorbs Earth damage in this form. Finally, Livin Chantado and Shadow Lord receive Neovision Awakenings for the Final Fantasy XI banner. Livin Chantado gets a powerful wind attack that really helps her wind damage, and some self buffs to raise the damage of her other abilities. She had a huge variety of elemental attacks with attacks that chain with Chaos Wave, and the elements missing here, Light and Dark, are on other abilities, though they haven't been buffed. Activate her Brave Shift and she becomes Mild Chantado, but no less dangerous. On top of Wind, she can now strengthen her Fire, Lightning, and Light damage output, with Wind and Light remaining her best options. Shadow Lord gets a stronger Dark Absolute Mirror of Equity and Boating Strike abilities, and oh my goodness, a 95% team-wide magic mitigation buff. It only lasts for one turn, but you get 2 uses, which feels pretty generous for such a high level of mitigation. Activate his Brave Shift and oh my goodness, a 95% physical mitigation buff. It has the same limitations, but that's still incredibly useful, especially for a unit whose rows list Attacker and Debuffer. Unfortunately, these mitigation buffs are on different forms, so you can't use both at once. Regardless, in this form he sticks with Dark Boating Strike attacks, and his Limit Burst is a powerful finishing strike, much better than his initial release. And that's all the units that will receive Neovision Awakenings in the near future. Keep in mind that we do have global original units, and since it's nearing April, no one will blame you for keeping your hopes up. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Feel free to comment below. Are you keeping tabs on any of these units? The only units that I'm close to Neovision Awakening are Nyx, Gladiolus, and Siegert, since I have their Super Trustmaster rewards. I would love to see the Easter units get Neovision Awakenings, since I have their Super Trustmaster rewards as well, but Zio receiving Neovision Awakening really opens up possibilities.